Hey, what's up? Flintoid here with another Disc Priest Legion video. So, this is going to be a follow-up to my original video, Reinventing the Meta. This is going to be more of a part 2, so I'm going to discuss kind of what I said in that video and how I applied it to the Emerald Nightmare raid tier. And then what I changed a little bit since that video, and basically evaluate my play and how everyone projected I was going to do versus how I actually did. So in my original video, it was heroic, basically right after heroic because it was opening week. That's all we could do was heroic. I discussed my Shadow Men strategy, so basically what you want to do is cast Shadow Men, Powered Shield, Penance in between like these like lull times when there's not a lot of burst going on. And in that video, basically, I just described that I made it sound like I was only using Shadow Men throughout the entire fight, that was the only thing I was using, and then like I would penance and powered shield and do all that jazz. But I've kind of incorporated burst into my play also, because it is very strong for Disc Priest. So before, I was talking about minor bursts used from your Shadow Men atonements. But now, as I start to learn the fights, as we progress through Mythic, what I started to do was I would use this Shadowman strategy, but I would, let's say, 10 seconds before a burst goes out, apply my Rapture spam. And then when the burst came out, I would do my burst and then go back to my Shadowman spamming. Or a few times, even if I had um, like a little bit extra mana, I would use Power Word Radiance right before a burst, and then burst with, Light's Wrath or Penance or so on and so forth. Um, so when I first discussed this video, or this strategy, it was not really well received in the high-end community. A lot of Disc Priests thought it was shit. There was a lot of memes posted about it, which were entertaining, to say the least. And let's take a look. So I know a couple of them said, oh, this will never work in Mythic. This is only a small thing. So this was after a couple weeks of Mythic. This is US rankings. My world ranking is 21st right now, but it seems to be holding pretty strong. I mean, 6 in the US, and it hasn't included this week's parts yet, or today's parses yet, which I did pretty well today. Um, So that's not too bad for this strategy. I mean, there's not too many people that are actually, you know, showing this strategy up per se. Just people playing better than myself. And when they started looking at logs like this, they're like, oh, well, it's only good for progression. It will never work when you try lower content. That is, it's going to be shit when you try to parse. And I haven't tried to parse in Mythic yet, to be honest. I rarely get innervates. So the only the only thing I've tried to parse in with this strat is normal so far, and I'd say I'm doing exceptionally well in that too. So I don't know. In my eyes, this strat works extraordinarily well. Um, so I'm gonna keep doing it. I'm just gonna keep doing it. And honestly, some of these buffs that they're coming out with, some of these changes that they came out with in 7.1 just makes my strategy even stronger, and the pure only burst strategy even a little less appealing. Now, a little disclaimer, the burst strategy, pure burst strategy with Purge the Wicked is really good if you know exactly what you're doing as opposed to timing, as opposed to stacking atonements, and you're just like perfect the entire fight. Potentially it can pull extremely good numbers, but the strategy, my Shadow Men strategy with burst in between, is a good way to pull consistent numbers. So, I mean, that's how I feel, and that's how I'm going to continue to heal. So I'm going to outline a little bit of the changes that I'm going to make for 7.1. So in 7.1, Mindbender has been reduced. The mana gain in Mindbender has been reduced by 0.25. Power Word Solace has been increased by 0.25. And Contrition has been increased by 1 second. I heard there was changes to Purge the Wicked, although I didn't see that in the direct patch notes, so I could be wrong about that. But I think Purge the Wicked's initial burst was nerfed, and then the dot was kept the same, although I can't really confirm that right now. So what I've been doing for 7.1 and what I'm going to continue doing, I've been testing out a couple of these things. So I tested out Mindbender today to see like how nerfed I felt that it was. And on the shorter fights, I don't know. I did feel like I was starved of mana slightly more than usual. I had to be a little more conservative. Sometimes I used to use, I used to use Drainic Intellect pots, but now they got the new like 2,500 pots. But I used to use DPS pots basically because I had so much mana in fights. With the Mindbender change, I feel like I run out of mana the last 20% of the fight, or 15% of the fight. So I could definitely feel it. So I switched to Shield Discipline for slightly longer fights, where Rapture Spam was. I mean, you can use Rapture Spam in pretty much every fight that I can think of. So Shield Discipline can be extremely strong. Basically gives you, I think it was 11,000 mana. I think it's 11,000 mana every time you use Power Word Shield. And if you have this trinket, the 7th Spine trinket, it gives you even more value to using Power Word Shield. So I use Shield Discipline for a lot of the time. I use Contrition. With the buff to Contrition, with that extra second, it might not seem like much, but whenever I would go from a spot healing to bursting, where I was preparing for a burst with Rapture or a few Power Word Radiances, and I would burst, after the burst, you don't have a lot. After you Light's Wrath and Penance, like, to keep up your burst, you could just continue smiting until your Penance comes back up. But by that time, your Atonement kind of falls off. But with Contrition, what can happen is it really magnifies the Shadowmen play, because after your burst, now you've got, a couple targets that aren't full health yet. You can switch to your Shadowmen and they're going to have, you'll be able to spot heal them hard with Grace. So I've been combining Contrition with Grace today, at least, and it's been working really, really well. I just feel myself getting a lot more value off of Shadowmen before. Before I would cover some people with Shadowmen and then penance them up, but now it's even more worth to just continue to Shadowmen people because of Grace and because of Contrition. Lasts so long on targets now, Atonement does. Halo, I highly recommend keeping Halo. I know they reduced the cast time on Clarity of Will, but honestly, for the mana and the length of cast, Clarity of Will is just not, it's still not worth it. Still not worth it. Maybe 5-mans this made more appealing than in 5-mans than Divine Star, but for a raid setting, I'm hard pressed to think of a situation where Clarity of Will would get more benefit than Halo. Especially if you're taking Grace. Halo gets buffed by Grace quite a bit. I get a lot of questions regarding trinkets. My favorite trinket combo right now is the Dark Moon Promises, which you can now buff up to 8 with Obliterum, and Amalgam's 7th Spine. If I don't need the mana with the 7th Spine, I swap it out for Flask of the Solemn Night, but that's just because my flask is pretty high. If you have a lower end flask, I still might recommend taking the 7th spine trinket unless you absolutely do not need the mana. So that's pretty much it. I'm really excited for Halls of Valor. Looks like some pretty cool bosses coming out. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll be more than happy to comment. I'll be posting videos a little more regularly. I took kind of like a small break after our Mythic clear, but I'll be coming back to try to inform you guys a little more. Alright, thanks a lot.